Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Learn and Grow series. This is our first meetup in 2024. I know you guys missed me. It's a bi-weekly meetup, and we've been skipping every other week because I was waiting for Tyler to kick off the year for us on good notes. And I'm super excited to have Tyler Chesser with us. He's an awesome guest. Welcome, Tyler. So happy to see you today.
Vinky, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and surrounded by some like-minded individuals who are looking to expand their thought process when it comes to emotional intelligence and expand their capacity to serve others and raising capital as a result. So thanks so much for having me. I'm excited.
Of course. So a little bit about Tyler. Tyler, I know for last few years, and he's pretty awesome person. I just fell in love with his mindset when I heard him first time on Ruben's podcast. I think that's where we met first time. And he's a renowned real estate entrepreneur and investor. And he also a co-founder of CF Capital and a host of a top-ranked podcast, Elevate. Actually, I was on his podcast too, which is like really amazing. You can check out that episode if you get a chance. So he has a good expertise in transforming his finances, businesses with his mindset. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. And we picked the topic for us today is mastering emotional intelligence for successful capital raising, because I feel like it's a very important topic to dwell into when it comes to emotional intelligence. Like, for example, I'm in the middle of a race right now. So I'm going through an emotional roller coaster. There's a lot of rejection and a lot of fear that's going on for us and for the investors. And you just kind of, paving your way, which way I should go, if it's going to work or not work for me. So I think emotional intelligence, it plays a crucial role, when it comes to enhancing our interpersonal skills or being empathetic or just being emotionally aware where we are or what we are trying to achieve. And because we are cooking up our own stories, when there's a rejection, we think, oh, maybe they're thinking this, maybe thinking that, versus trying to find out exactly what investors thinking. So Tyler, I think it's going to be more like a Q&A, or do you have a presentation?
It's just going to be more of a Q&A, but I do have some particular things that I do want to discuss. And Vinky, I know you and I talked about kind of a flow of what we should anticipate here, but I'm actually really happy that you shared that you're currently in a raise and you're bumping, right up on this topic on a day-to-day basis. And I'm sure others in this meetup today are maybe experiencing similar things. And today, obviously, as we're in January 2024, we're in a kind of still a very volatile economic climate, a volatile equity environment. And so I think this conversation is extremely relevant today because, to your point, Vinky, equity is still a little bit skittish. When I say equity, let's just simplify. I mean, investors, whether you're raising from high net worth individuals, accredited or non-accredited sophisticated investors, people are experiencing a wide range of emotions today that are impacting interactions between opportunities, interactions with themselves in terms of the complexity of making decisions on investment opportunities and so forth. So there's a great book. If anybody has not read the book, it's called Emotional Intelligence 2.0. And who is the author of that book? I actually have that written down. If anybody hasn't read that, it is Gene Greaves and Travis Bradberry. It's a great book. So I'm just going to go ahead and start giving you some resources. I read that book years ago, and it was kind of my introductory into this world, but extremely valuable because I think awareness is the first step to increasing your emotional intelligence. And in many respects, emotional intelligence is a quotient that can increase your success in a much different degree than intelligence. A lot of people think about IQ. If I want to become more successful, I need to increase my IQ. I need to go get that degree, or I need to get the degree on top of that next degree. And I need to increase my intelligence on the decisions that you're making, but also the relationships that you have with potential partners. So I think, Vinky, if you're okay with it, maybe we just start with kind of defining what emotional intelligence is.
Exactly.
And if you,
My first question is for you, so please go ahead.
so and again, I'll try to bring some more context to this, but if you think about the definition of emotional intelligence is the ability to understand, use, and manage your own emotions in positive ways to relieve stress, communicate effectively, empathize with others, overcome challenges, and diffuse conflict. So, what does that mean? It helps you build stronger relationships. It can help you become more successful in your personal life and professional life, and ultimately achieve your career goals. At the end of the day, I know a big concept that most of us have become extremely fond of, and as you apply it more and more, you see the value in it is who, not how. Right? Anything that you want to accomplish in your life, and a lot of us we've set our goals for 2024. We're excited about what's possible. We're also probably a little bit feeling a little bit apprehension because of the level of challenges in today's marketplace. But if we want to go further faster, it's about who are we impacting? Who are we adding value to? So emotional intelligence is really that, but it can be commonly defined by four different attributes. And Vinky, maybe we can go into some detail around these, but self-management is one, self-awareness is another, social awareness is number three, and then number four is relationship management. So we can talk about how all that plays in, but I just wanted to at least kind of set the stage for like, what is this concept? What is emotional intelligence? And then how can we actually start to break this down to gain more context and start to applying it more intelligently? So, Vinky, am I kind of making sense here, or what are your thoughts so far?
I think, yes, you're making sense. You're right on the dot, actually. And then the four things is you said, the first thing is the self-awareness. If you are not self-aware, you cannot do much. So let's talk about that. What exactly self-awareness is? Because in self-awareness, you need to find out who am I first. And who am I is
Mm-hmm.
very, very important. And a lot of times we forget who am I, and we do not even know our own personality or how we are projecting outside the world, because we are taking all the outer stimulation and just see, okay, that's how maybe people see us, and we try to be that persona. So if you can talk about that, that'd be super awesome. I mean, how did you do it, basically?
Yeah, so I mean, self-awareness, when I think about self-awareness, you can think about it from one context to say, I have phenomenal self-awareness or I have no self-awareness. And, there are these learning steps. If you're not familiar with the learning steps, you might want to familiarize yourself with it. But there's a certain level of when maybe you're at the very first step of learning some concept, whether it's self-awareness or anything else, you're unconsciously incompetent about that concept. So if you have if you've never heard of this self-awareness piece of the emotional intelligence concept, you may be in an unconsciously incompetent state, or perhaps you're starting to learn more about self-awareness. And we'll talk again about kind of what that is here shortly. You may be consciously incompetent. You may think, wow, this whole time, my whole life, I've been, lacking self-awareness about the emotions that I'm bringing to relationships or circumstances, right? Or perhaps as you've grown, you started to become more consciously competent about the, mindfulness that you're bringing to certain circumstances, opportunities, or relationships. And that's, the next step along your journey. And then from there, you may get to a point where you become unconsciously competent, or perhaps even lastly, you have become sort of mindfully competent, which means you're flowing and you're in a mastery type of state. So I don't want to overcomplicate the conversation by bringing in the learning steps, but I do want to at least introduce that as well, because that's another part of this process. Let's start to become aware of how we're showing up. And so self-awareness, in my opinion, this is a very dynamic concept. This is not a one-dimensional concept, but it is becoming more conscious of how you're showing up. Do you have a belief system that is serving you and others, or do you have a belief system that perhaps is limiting yourself and others? Especially in capital raising, I think it's a critical concept to think about, because mindset is in many respects everything when it comes to capital raising, because ultimately your belief systems translate into an energy It translates into the way that you speak with someone else. It translates into the level of energy, or Vinky, I know you love this, your vibration. At the end of the day, your vibration is either one of lack or of abundance and of clarity and of transference. Ultimately, this is a concept that I think is critically important. So you think about, self-awareness, it comes down to how mindful are you of beliefs that you have that may be limiting you, they may be serving you, or so forth. And how are you becoming more conscious of creating those conditions that are going to serve yourself and others? But self-awareness, I think, is it's a very dynamic concept. But there's, if you think about self-awareness in a couple different states, you could think about it again in a mastery sense, or you could think about it on the other end of the spectrum. I think it may be helpful for us to define what is a sign of low emotional intelligence from a self-awareness perspective. It may show up to be like a need to be right. Like, for example, Vinky, you have this deal right now that you're raising capital for. Um, I'm sure you would probably agree, especially with how mindful you are and how much work you do on yourself to be able to recognize this, that your deal is probably not for everyone. Would you agree that that's probably the case? I'm sure
100%.
you're very, I'm sure you're very passionate about your deal, and in more cases than not, there are reasons why you're pursuing it. There are reasons why you're offering the opportunity to others. But we also have to recognize from an emotional intelligence perspective, in terms of self-awareness, that it may be right for us, but it may not be right for all of our investors or every prospective investor. And it may not even be right for a high percentage of folks that we interact with. Does that resonate with you, Vinky?
100%. Actually, I was talking before this meeting. I was in another meeting with Yaka, and I was saying the same thing, because there's a lot of rejections that you have to prepare for when you're in the capital raising field. And when people say no, it just like feels like, oh, what did I do wrong? That's the first question. What is wrong with my deal? Or what was wrong with
Mm,
my presentation? And then we cook up our own stories. Oh, maybe this was the reason they're saying no, and then add to it. But actually we do not try to understand the investor's perspective, where they're coming from. They could have a
mhm,
totally different story or totally different reason to say no, or they wanted to
mhm,
wait on this one. And then you said it very well, because emotional intelligence plays a big role, or self-awareness plays a really big role in capital raising or any field in our life, because we are
mhm.
adapting ourselves to so many different personalities. And I would like you to expand more on that, when we are in this role, how we should adapt ourselves, being
Mhm,
self-aware at the same time to different personalities. So we're kind of at their vibration, at their wavelength, and kind of
mhm,
talking their language so they understand us, where they're coming from. So they know that we are on their side. We are not trying to sell them something or pitch them something or get them into something that they don't want.
mhm. Yeah, and the position that I've adopted on this is that we're playing the long game, and
Mhm.
the long game comes down to long-term relationships with our investors, whether or not they pursue every single opportunity that we have. And so ultimately, if you want to build those long-term relationships, it comes down to, people knowing, liking, and trusting you. And I think if you come with an energy of service, of I'm here to build a long-term relationship, and I'm not here for a transaction, I'm here for a transformation together, then I think that solves a lot of the initial issues. Um, but I think that, when you think about emotional intelligence, a sign of low emotional intelligence is the inability to accurately perceive emotions within yourself and others, and using that information to guide your thinking and action. So if you think about it, if you have if you have the inability to perceive your own emotions as well as others, then you're never going to be able to truly come from that place of service where you're adding value for the long haul. So I think when you think about, all right, I'm offering an opportunity, I'm not selling anything. You can then enter a conversation with an investor removing yourself from a needing energy of closing this deal or closing this investor. This is truly about understanding their perspective and understanding the dynamics of their emotions that are playing into how they're interacting with their entire life, their entire goal set of goals and objectives, and North Star that they're looking to accomplish. And it's a complicated thing. We have to recognize that each of us are extremely complicated individuals. Our emotions are multidimensional, and that's the same with our investors. And by the way, investment decisions, if we were to just take the emotions out of it, they are also complicated as well. So there are many different factors playing into anytime you're interacting in a capital raise. And then, of course, you add more and more people in the mix, and it can feel like an emotional roller coaster for all parties. And so, I think the emotional intelligence piece is not only showing up with a self-aware attitude and continue to learning. By the way, that's a journey in itself. There is no end destination in terms of your self-awareness. Peggy, it looks like you raised your hand. Love to invite you in here as well.
Thank you. So one of the things that I've realized out over all these years of raising capital is, and it's me, I come from what I know and my basic attitude about how great real estate is. And when I have a conversation with another person, it's opening the mind to what's important to them. It's all about service. It's never about us. But my coaches have told me I'm set in some of my ways. And the purpose of having your coaches and your mentors is so that somebody can basically slap you across the face and wake you up, right? So we're as self-aware as, in my particular case, I've been going through self-aware courses since I was in the 70s. No matter how self-aware you are, you don't change. You need somebody, to me, as much as you change and move with everything, the conversation disappears. Do you remember that? So having a coach, having a mentor, having your team to remind you that that wasn't a very good conversation you just had, or that was a great conversation you had. And we found that by the way we do have conversations with our clients is they have opened their minds also, because one of our things is to always protect the investor, to not invest in just one arena, because if all you invested in was office, you'd be in a little trouble right now. So we've trained our people that are working with us to invest in a lot of different things. So again, however I might be more mindset, that mindset is a benefit too. So we have to look at all of it, I think. I don't know if I'm making any sense at all, but I know that I come from one direction, but I realize I have to come from many, many directions. And that's why you keep having conversations with people. It's not one conversation, it's a conversation every month or so.
That's true.
Well,
I
it
think you said
seems.
it well. I mean, that's what I think Tyler was saying. Sorry to cut you off, because this is like a more like a holistic picture of yourself. And that could only happen if you turn inwards a little bit. I think that's what he's talking about. Just be
Mhm.
self-aware about yourself, your emotions. The next question I think Tyler was going to ask you is just, sometimes if you're not self-aware of your emotions, like when you're talking to somebody, you might be getting some kind of itchy feeling or some kind of feeling in your stomach, nervousness, or something is going on. You're ignoring that, you keep on going, but there might be those indications that's leading to you to some emotional cues, to figure
Mhm.
out what your investor is, what the other person is bringing on the table. So from your experience, I would like to understand, how you have done that, or how you have, found those cues and then kind of use that for you to do better relationship building.
I think it's a great question, and a concept that we should definitely be focusing on here is really intuition. I mean, that's really what you're referring to.
Mhm.
Some people may call it their gut feeling. Other people may describe it as infinite intelligence or the unconscious mind. And in many respects, this is really where, deep and true, really, I guess, unexplainable intelligence really exists within all of us. And if you really look at the science, 95% of our brain is really, you know, 95% of our intelligence is really utilized through our unconscious or our subconscious mind. And so ultimately, that feeling that you may have that you may not be able to put your finger on about why you feel a certain way about someone is really a clue in terms of perhaps something that is a much higher degree of intelligence than you could ever become conscious of. And so I think, really what you're talking about, like when we're having a conversation, if you're having some sort of a feeling on, maybe this person feels a little uneasy, or maybe this person just feels like chaotic, or they feel there's something about this conversation that feels stressful. It's important to recognize that, become aware of that, and, when appropriate, maybe even call it out. And I think it really goes back to the foundation of entering into these relationships from a transformational perspective rather than a transactional perspective. Because if you enter these conversations from a transactional perspective, you're like, all right, how do I overcome this objection? And how do I get them to not feel that way so that they can start to feel positive about my deal and I can close them? That's not the way to do this. That's not the way to build long-term relationships with investors. Because if you win that battle, you're going to lose the long-term war, which is, at the end of the day, it's all about long-term relationships. And so when you place your finger, so to speak, in this gut, this intuition on this understanding, you can call it out and you can say, hey, you know what? I'm noticing a little bit of stress from your end, and I'd love to, just recognize, is that something that maybe I'm bringing to this conversation, or is that maybe something going on with you, and maybe that's something that you want to talk about, maybe you don't want to talk about. So there may be appropriate times to do that. But this is an extremely dynamic concept as well, because each and every interaction that you have, you are bringing a perspective and perhaps a certain level of rose-colored glasses to the conversation, where maybe you have some emotional residue from an experience that you had last month or last year, or the day before, or even that morning, that you may be clouding your own perception of the conversation and of the interaction to a certain degree. And that chaotic feeling may actually be coming from you. And so, this emotional intelligence can start to separate, and you can start to, again, like for me, actually, this is a practice, and I know, Vinky, it is for you as well, of becoming more mindful about, the emotions that you're bringing to a circumstance, and recognizing that each of us are bringing, a certain level of emotions to a circumstance that may be clouding the way that we're receiving information or the way that we're perceiving the interaction. So, I don't know if that answers your question, Vinky, but I feel like I'm
It does.
sharing a lot of complicated stuff there.
So you were saying very good thing about the experience, because everybody has their own experience, right? So our personality is built upon our experiences, what our past experiences are, because our mind is like a supercomputer. It stores all the information consciously, subconsciously, everything is there, whether you are carefully looking at something or not even paying attention, still it's being registered. So whenever some situation comes that's similar to whatever your experiences are, there's going to be automated response, right? A lot of times you say people abruptly say no to something. Why? They didn't even hear the whole pitch. They don't even know exactly what you're talking about, or like, I'm not interested. Because you do that too. I do that all the time, and I get a phone call from somebody from the solar or something, because I don't want the solar. As soon as I say I'm with the solar company, I'm like, I'm not interested. But there's some past experience that kicks in as an automated response. So that's where the self-awareness comes too. So if you can, shed some light on that too, how you can separate yourself from your experiences. I think you were talking about that earlier a little bit too. So create that pause or that little bit separation, so you have little time to think your answer versus having the automated response. Because that's what happens with the in the capital raising game too, right? When we judge people too quickly.
Yeah, I think the service-oriented mindset is also a big piece here, and when you take time to to clarify and to really understand the story beneath the story, I think that that's that's a practice that I would recommend. And what I really mean by that is, a lot of times yourself and others may be conscious of this or may be unconscious of the fact that an objection may be coming from a place that is being shared logically, but is being really decided illogically beneath the surface for many different reasons that have nothing to do with the actual objection that has been shared. And I think the service oriented mindset comes into an interaction with an investor and says, help me understand more about that. Help me understand more about, whatever factor about this deal that you feel like isn't necessarily a fit for you. And I feel like Vinky, the question that you asked earlier, maybe the example that you posed is relevant too, because I know I feel that way too. I get reached out to just constantly for, you know, many different opportunities or new technology platforms that's gonna totally transform the way that our company does business in all of these different ways. And I can tell you that in many respects, my first response is there's just not enough time in the day to explore all of these different opportunities. So, 7 or 8 or 9 times out of 10, we're basically just either not responding or saying thanks, but no thanks. And so maybe there's an opportunity to become even more self-aware on my perspective to say, some of these opportunities may be things that we should be truly considering. And so trying to kind of separate from the noise. But there was I think this concept is 2,000 plus years old, and probably many more years old even beyond that. But Marcus Aurelius, the ancient Roman emperor, back in ancient Roman times, said that between stimulus and response there is space,
Mhm.
and in that space is really where the intelligence lies. And so it's a practice to really slowing down your response to a stimulus, and to recognizing that you're bringing a certain level of bias to every single interaction. Like, for example, I know that politics it can be extremely triggering for the average individual. Like, it's 2024, it's an election year, and we're going to see some polarizing behavior on all angles, on from every side of the coin. And between stimulus and response, there is a space, but the average American or the average person doesn't live in that space. The average American or the average person is stimulus response immediately. And there's this feeling that we have when someone disagrees with something that, we hold so deeply to the core of our identity. And so our emotions start to flood and they start to put us in a position of fight or flight. And we lose our ability to think intelligently and identify an opportunity to create a better relationship with an individual when we do not live in that space. And we don't start to say, the mindful approach would say, wow, this stimulus is causing me to feel a certain way. Is that a healthy way? Is that a serving sort of emotion that is being brought up here, or am I being put in a place where my emotions are getting a little out of control? Maybe I'm feeling fear. Maybe I'm feeling anger. Maybe I'm feeling sadness. Maybe I'm feeling excitement. How is it that I'm mindful about what I'm feeling from a certain circumstance, and how am I interacting as a result? So I think it is, there's many different angles of this, but the bias piece is an important one as well, because if we become mindful of certain biases that we have about other people, we can start to break that down, and we can start to say, wait a minute, why would I feel that way about this person? Where did that thought process come into play? And is that something that's actually going to help me and them achieve their goals? So does that make sense, Vinky?
Yeah, it does. So you brought up a really good question. This 2024 is an election year, right? A lot of sentiments, a lot of emotions, and people are trying to kind of sit on the sidelines. They are scared. They do not know because the past experiences not so good, right? So
Mm-hmm.
in this election year, what is your approach? How are you gonna be balancing your assertiveness versus empathy? Because I think we need to be a little bit more empathetic in this kind of situation. So if you could talk about that.
Yeah, so this is a good one. So basically, it's the difference between how do you strike the balance between empathy and assertiveness. And I think we take it from the angle of capital raising in particular. I think it's always better to revert to an empathetic perspective and recognize that we're playing a more complicated game than I think a lot of us give credit to in many respects. I mean, ultimately, yes, real estate can be simplified and it we shouldn't overcomplicate the business and so forth, but the emotions that are being interacted with from our perspective as well as all of our investors, it's a very dynamic piece here. So I think it's important to, your baseline should be empathy and to recognize that we're all complicated people. But there are times where being more aggressive is appropriate, and it really depends on the type of person that you're interacting with, or the type of situation that you find yourself in. So let me clarify. There are people who you would describe as more of kind of a high D type of personality or more of a dominant type of personality. And a lot of those type of folks are very successful in business and in life. And you may be emotionally intelligent to recognize that you're having a conversation with someone who fits in that type of personality. And in that circumstance, it may resonate with that individual for you to be a little bit more assertive. And that's not for you to say, that's not for you to lack an empathetic approach to recognize that that type of personality was created through certain circumstances and whether or not that's actually serving them or limiting their future, you know, you're you're a little agnostic to that, but you still have an empathetic approach to that individual. But you may find that being more aggressive or assertive in the conversation with your opportunity with that individual may actually be serving them to a higher degree. There may also be other times where perhaps you have somebody who doesn't necessarily have a dominant type of personality. And of course, you're bringing an empathetic approach, but maybe, look, your deal's closing in 2 weeks. And if they don't, get off the pot and make a decision, they're not going to have this opportunity. And after taking some time to understand their goals, objectives, and really, walk through the opportunity and walk through, some of the things that they're bringing to the table, and you really feel strongly that it is in their best interest for them to participate, at that point, you may consider being a little bit more aggressive in your approach. I don't know if you've experienced that yourself, Vinky, but I do think it's kind of like it's a little bit of a dance.
It is. I agree with you 100%. And you brought up a very good point. So I'm going to ask you over here too, how have you done it? Because sometimes, it puts us in a self-doubt too, sometimes. So how do you get out of, you talk about that earlier a little bit about self-doubting. So how do you get out of that, mental set and then just make this deal or this approach just like, investor focus, like just tell them, oh, this is for you. This is your vision, this is your perspective, that's what you want, but you have to understand their story before you can do that. So how have you done that? Because I know when people say no, you feel like, oh my god, what I'm doing wrong, what's wrong with me, why can't I raise money, I'm not doing it right. So those are all the things play a big role actually.
Well, hopefully this is helpful for everybody to engage in this conversation and recognize that we all have self-doubt, especially when you're raising capital, especially when you are, encountering no after no, perhaps, and maybe you're feeling like there's more rejection. Recognize that the internal bias and really how we were wired as human beings really comes down to evolution and really a survival mindset. And the survival mindset is, encoded within us from hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution. Human evolution is looking for the negative, right? To survive, we've got to find the predator. We've got to find the threat on the horizon. And as a capital raiser in that type of circumstance, the threat is rejection, or the threat is an investor saying thanks but no thanks. And there's a little bit of mindfulness there to recognize that, okay, if I wallow in that feeling, then I'm just going to bring this needing energy to the next interaction, right? The needing, I need this investor to invest in my deal, or I'm not going to reach my goals. And so, is that focused on yourself or is that focused on others? That's focused really more so on yourself. Not an easy thing to do, But Peggy shared something I think very valuable earlier about, having coaches and people in your life to be able to reflect for you and help you become more self-aware. I think it's important for you to, to get out of your own head about certain things like this, talk with your team, talk with other people in your life, and help them kind of talk you off the ledge a little bit, but also recognize that perhaps some of these feelings are really more so human nature and biological more than something that's actually going to help you thrive. Because there's a big difference in surviving in real estate and surviving as a business owner, surviving as a human being, than like thriving and achieving your larger goals. And, again, emotional intelligence is not just recognizing, things that other people are bringing to the table, but recognizing what you're bringing to the table, recognizing the energy that you're bringing, and that needing energy is a much different place to come from than the giving energy. And one of the other sort of mantras or thought processes that I have is, I don't need any investor to come in on our deals. I don't necessarily need you, but you may really benefit from this opportunity. And the thing that I always share with my folks is, look, I'm here to help you have more of a clear understanding of this opportunity than perhaps you would have otherwise. And I'd love to have you on board. And if it is a fit for you, that's great. If it's not, that's totally fine. There's no pressure. I want you to know that from the get go. And then from there, we can have a clear conversation to where they understand that I'm not here to close them. I'm not here to, make them say yes. I'm here to help them look at this opportunity as, a third party would, as a friend would, to say, does this make sense for you moving forward? And also to address any emotions that they're bringing to the table that may be getting in the way of them making the best decision for them in their future.
I love it. Oh my God. You said, oh my God, you were just throwing all the golden nuggets right there. That's super awesome. You mentioned few good things. You said survival mode and then needing versus giving. Because the thing is, when we are in the survival mode, it's always like you're needing something. And that's what happens because you're on a constant churn when you're in a survival mode, because you want more and more and more. You like need it. So when you, bypass that survival mode, get to the next level, that's where this feeling of giving comes. Then you're like more like adding value. How do I add value to others or to the community or the people around me? Your mindset is totally different. So it's a shift. It's not necessarily being a survival mode is like you are there by default and you cannot get out of here. I think it's more like a choice when you decide to get out of that churn or when you decide to get out of that survival mode. Because the thing is, you can keep on raising your bar. I do not have enough. I do not have enough. And you're going to stay there forever versus saying, oh, I have enough. I'm getting like 2 meals a day. Maybe I'm satisfied with that. So what next for me? Maybe I can just more like on the giver side of mentality, start adding value to others. It's all you, right? So in your experience, have you have any experience like that for that kind of mental shift or mind shift when you decided, oh, why I'm doing this a constant churn now? Let me not do that anymore. I'm going to put a stop to it and let me move on to do something else. Let me try that, see what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. So many great things there, Vinky, and a few things that I would say, making a couple notes here. Um, Number one, gratitude is the state of receivership. I'll say that again. Gratitude is the state of receivership. It sounds weird, it sounds backwards, it sounds upside down, but when you come with a grateful emotional base, that is felt. It's not only felt by you, but it's felt by others, and the universe delivers more to those who are grateful. I think it's kind of a natural law of the universe, but maybe that's a conversation for another day. So this is a constant battle that we all have to fight. I know I am in this space as well. I can sit here and have this conversation with you, Vinky, and act like the sage on the stage and all these kind of things, but I can tell you that I battle with this stuff on a daily basis, every single day, where I recognize that I'm focusing on the negative. I'm focusing on the lack. I'm focusing on, the folks who may have declined the opportunity rather than those who engaged in the opportunity, or the capital that we have raised, or all of the other amazing things in our life, which tends to create more, right? Where focus goes, energy flows. That's a great mantra to integrate within your daily practice, is that where focus goes, energy flows. And it's so true when it comes to capital raising as well. If you're focusing on what you don't have, you're going to get more of that. If you're
Mhm.
focusing on all of the rejections, or all of the volatility, or all the negativity, or all the crazy headlines that we see on a daily basis, you're going to get more of that in your world. So what are you doing to input information into your mind, and point out and become more aware and conscious of all the things that you want more of? So what would you, if where focus goes, energy flows, what would you like to focus on? Let's focus on the goal. Let's focus on the dream. Let's focus on, the good things that we're looking to create. And also, by the way, be thankful for the great things that we have in our life today. And there's another key, if you really want to, take this to the next level, it's about being grateful for what you are creating as well. What you are, what is in your future as well. By the way, if you want to learn more about this, I highly recommend that you study a concept called quantum mechanics, or quantum
Mhm.
physics, because it's not only spiritual, and of course, in many respects, it is a spiritual game, and business and capital raising, in many respects, is a very spiritual game. But there's also science behind this. And so I'll just kind of leave a little cliffhanger there. The other piece that I think is a really helpful way to approach this is that, you're thinking about where focus goes, energy flows. The other piece is, it's never a matter of your resources, but it's always a matter of your resourcefulness. So
Mhm.
for every problem, there is a solution. And when you start to recognize that, and you could maybe even just think that thought in your head and just say, you know what, let me just use this as a thought experiment to see if that really is the case. You start to find solutions. You start to find opportunities to take action on creating what you want. And so now we're focusing on solutions rather than problems. We're focusing on, being resourceful rather than the resources that we think we have or do not have. So, those are some things and tools that I have to integrate myself. But I think where the nature of the question, Vinky, is so important, is that, anybody that any of us look up to in life, and this is something I have to remind myself of every single day. We've got this is a constant work in progress, and just because we felt like we overcame this yesterday or last week doesn't mean that, what, we may need to, recharge the engine and refocus on this. But some of these mantras, like where focus goes, energy flows, resourcefulness is greater than resources, and gratitude is a state of receivership. These are things, if you can start to recognize that these can become a part of your identity in the event that you interact with these concepts on a consistent basis, I think you're going to be really excited to see what's possible for you.
This is pretty awesome. Thank you so much, Tyler. I love that, whatever you shared with us. So anybody has any question, please go ahead and ask. This is the time to ask Tyler and pick his brain.
Can we take the emotion out and not be emotional about what we're doing because it's a job, so to speak?
That
That's a
would
good
be
one, actually. If you can do that, that'd be awesome. But then it's like you're controlling your emotions. That's not good either, because if you try to control something, so it's gonna burst some way. So you have to manage them in a way that they don't come in the way of you doing things successfully.
I'm
But
looking at it as being unattached. I'm unattached to the outcome.
that is a great, actually, Peggy, I love that. First of all, in my opinion, you're never going to fully remove the emotions from
Sure.
the, because we're emotional beings, human beings, that's just what we are. But the unattached, I'm so glad that you said that, because I was actually grasping for that word. Unattached is the feeling that you should approach any investor conversation, in my opinion, because the unattached piece means that I'm coming from a place of service. I'm not here to close you. I'm
Mhm,
here to truly serve you.
exactly.
So I really
When I
like
was
that.
young and dateable age, I'd even drive to a place and I would never get out of my car and go in because it was all about me and how you were and all of that. And now I walk in anywhere because it's never about me. But
Mhm.
it takes that whole mind shift that it's not about me. I'm here to serve. I'm here to meet all these people. Let me find out what they do and how we can support them. So it doesn't matter. So it's so different and it's so great. Just too bad it couldn't happen in my 20s. So
So there's a couple other resources that I might suggest, and if anybody hasn't read these books, I would recommend them. And actually kind of reflects, I think, the percentages that we interact with each other from an emotional perspective as well as a logical perspective. In my opinion, it's probably 80% or so is emotional, 20% logical. There's a book, it's called Never Split the Difference
oh
by Chris Voss, and it really refers to negotiation and how emotional we are. And if you really want to be a successful negotiator, in many respects, raising capital is a negotiation. Never Split the Difference is a great book. On the logical side, there was a book written by, I think it was sponsored by the Harvard Research Project, called Getting to Yes. And it's really
yeah.
about understanding principles and perspectives and goals and objectives and really overlapping those and saying, does this actually make sense from a logical perspective? And I think there's value in bringing, both of those perspectives to the table.
That's good. Go ahead, Matt.
Thanks. Thanks, Tyler, for this presentation. I just have a quick question. Do I need to study up on the DISC or the Enneagrams to be able to really hone in on someone's emotional state and their reactions and even my own self-awareness of those?
It would definitely be helpful just to have a baseline of understanding of, how you're showing up and the other categories of personalities, just so you could at least have more perspective. Because recognizing that all of us have a briefly different or, maybe vastly different perspective is helpful so that you understand where people are coming from and where you may be coming from. That would be my suggestion. But Vinky, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I think now that's a good idea because the thing is, but you gotta be 100% truthful, because sometimes when you're doing that desk, I used to do that in my classroom all the time too, because sometimes you're giving the answers just like that, but you truly need to know who you are in order to get the best results. And then it's always a good idea to do that because that helps you to match with the other personalities around you. I like that, actually, I use a lot. But with that being said, we are kind of out of time. And thank you so much, Tyler. Would you please tell us how to contact you? People might want to connect with you after this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll put my email in the chat here, but you can reach me on my website, cfcapllc.com or tylerchesser.com. And my email is tyler@cfcapllc.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tyler, for being with us today. And I always enjoy talking to you. And thanks for all your practices, whatever you're doing to open yourself up to receiving, I'm on the same path as well.